I do want to talk a little bit about mumps. Mumps is a disease that, again, as an infectious disease physician, you get asked about from time to time. No big deal, we've got a vaccine. Well, these are the data from the mumps notifications in Western Australia from 93 to 2017. And in 2007, 2008, we had an outbreak, and there's a couple of hundred cases were affected. And then over the last 2 years, we've seen this, an extraordinary outbreak that's happened in Western Australia. Now, we know also that there have been cases that have occurred in South Australia, or in Northern Territory, I think even more recently in Queensland. So this is not just a WA problem, but the size of the outbreak has been extraordinary. And we'll just play this. Maybe I can play it. This is a video, if it works. Yes, there we go. Just showing the emergence of the outbreak in Western Australia, beginning up in the north, then cases popping down in Perth and in Kalgoorlie and Geraldton, and then the dots are getting bigger, up particularly in the remote areas in Perth and then in Kalgoorlie and Geraldton, but scattered throughout. So it really is a nice description of how the cases have been spreading over time. This is a more classic picture that you'll be familiar with, the epidemic curve, just showing an 18-month period of ongoing mumps transmission, and this is clinical disease. That particularly occurred in the Kimberley, but did also spread throughout the state. And what's really interesting, the age distribution, the peak age group was the 15 to 19-year-olds. This is almost exclusively in Aboriginal people. And look at this. They were almost all immunised. They almost all had 2 doses of vaccine. You'd think that should protect you. So most of these cases, 900 cases, got mumps, and there will be complications, particularly in terms of sterility for some of these people, and most of them had been immunised. And there's a lot of questions as to why did this vaccine that most of these people got not protect them from mumps disease? Well, we're not sure. There's this question about whether or not there's waning immunity, and there are good data on this. There's an outbreak in England that looked at duration since the last dose of vaccine, and basically you had increasing age, increasing time since last vaccine, and there was decreasing effectiveness of the vaccine. The same was seen in France. And indeed, if you look at this outbreak, the time since their second dose, obviously, once you got to more than 8 years since your second dose, the vaccine effectiveness seemed to be the lowest. And so waning immunity is certainly a possibility, but there are a whole lot of other aspects here, and we're not entirely sure. So there is work going on around just how immunologically protected those cases were compared to controls. We think there is a contribution of waning vaccine-induced immunity, but why is it just that it was an Aboriginal issue? Why didn't everybody get exposed to this? So almost certainly there's something to do with the demographics of the Aboriginal population. So there's not a lot of data that suggests that Aboriginal people are peculiarly likely to have waning immunity. There are some data, so there's probably some biology to it. But also, if you think about the chance of being exposed, it's related to household crowding and high mobility of the population. And that's really thought to be it's really this kind of concept of a perfect storm that led to this mumps outbreak, that led to sustained transmission for 18 months. The response was to give a 3rd dose of vaccine in closed communities and in boarding schools, and that, where it was done soon after the first case, where there was good coverage, then it did stop transmission beyond a singular incubation period. But there's not currently a plan to have a routine 3rd dose. It's thought that probably we need to be acting early in outbreaks. But this is an ongoing question. And again, if you'd asked me a few years ago, would we have an outbreak of 900 mumps cases in people who are fully immunised, I'd have said, you've got to be joking.